Thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time here at Nooga Radio, the platform, the multimedia platform for the man who matters, brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. And yes, it's not a popular website, and it's not popular, and that's why you should go there. It's not popular because very few people really matter. And they're the ones who do, though, they need to know how the deep structure of government and the marketplace operates. And we go into those questions at Nooganomics.com. Again, read my essay today, an analysis of the turn to isolationism, isolationism by the city council, on which there is not a single member who operates principially, that is to say, in terms of principle, in favor of the free market, in favor of the gig city, which is the city's moniker, the city's marketing tag, and in favor of constitutional liberties. There's an effort afoot to regulate and to ban the connections through Airbnb, the online home sharing network, and these are simply violations of the Constitution and also violations of general principles in Tennessee, namely the ban, the prohibition of arbitrary and capricious acts and ordinances and laws that are being proposed as future ordinances in Tennessee. So this is something that you'll need to read about at Nooganomics.com. I'm the writer that's covered this in the context of ideas, and I think ideas really matter more than news. And so you get the news and you get the idea of the problem by reading Nooganomics.com. David Tulis, again, we cover local economy and the free markets in Chattanooga and beyond. The beyond right now is Tennessee as a whole. And for coverage there, we rely on Chris Butler. He's an analyst and writer, and he's funded by private interests to be a watchdog. He runs TennesseeWatchdog.org. That's TennesseeWatchdog.org, that has a view of the whole state. So he covers actions in cities and counties all across Tennessee and provides a free market analysis, a taxpayer conscious coverage of the operations of government, county, municipal, and state. Chris, Tennessee has many cities going into the broadband business, and there are problems afoot, you suggest, citing a recent study. What's the study all about?
Well, a study came out not too terribly long ago, written by a University of Pennsylvania law school professor named Christopher Yu. And he examined the trend of municipal broadband nationwide. And because so much of this is originating out of Tennessee, Tennessee was a significant focus of his study. And he examined the financial toll that these projects take on a local community's finances, because a lot of this is the municipal broadband is done through public utilities, and the public utilities is backed by taxpayer dollars. So in the event that the public utility can't recoup its money, they can always rely on the taxpayers, a never-ending supply of taxpayer money to prop them up. And as part of this study, he examined several of the cities in the state that are using municipal broadband. And I'll give you an example. Pulaski, Tennessee, he looked at the audits and the numbers, and he concluded that it's going to take 500 years before their municipal broadband system becomes cash positive. You looked at Clarksville, never going to become cash positive. Tullahoma, 108 years. Now, I could just go on and on, but what's important for your listeners to know is that he also said in this study that these municipal broadband systems have a shelf life of about 30 to 40 years with what's being financed to pay for them right now. So it's not really what you would call a wise investment.
Well, what does the word shelf life mean? What does that implies somehow that 40 years from now, EPB and the broadband services in towns like Fayetteville will have expired somehow, that they'll be moldy, undesirable. They won't be valuable. They won't produce revenue. What's implied in the idea?
It'll be the first time that's happened in government. Well, technology is always progressing. I mean, I'm talking to you on an iPhone right now, and we didn't have these things 15 years ago. And 10 or 15 years from now, there will be newer, better, different technologies than what we're using right now. The people who run the mom and pop internet service provider operations, and I'm not talking about AT&T or the Charters or whomever, the mom and pop people tell me that in maybe 5 or 6 years, technology is going to progress to the point that you won't need wires to connect to your laptop or your desktop to the internet to get high-speed internet, that it's all going to be wireless the same way it can be wireless on the smartphone technology. So that means people in rural areas, some little town with maybe 100 or 200 people where there is no ultra high-speed internet right now, are going to have access to this stuff. And through the free market, it most likely will be less expensive than anything is today, and that means they're competing against a utility, a public utility that is offering this service, and it's a better technology than what the public utility can offer. People are going to go to the private service, which means that the public utilities most likely are going to lose even more money than what was originally projected by this analyst from Pennsylvania.
Well, in your report about this at TennesseeWatchdog.org, this is David Tulis, by the way. We're talking with Chris Butler, who is the analyst at TennesseeWatchdog.org. You say that Fayetteville has a good prospect. It will be having positive cash flow in 61 years. Now that's among the cities you mentioned. That's the one that has the best prospect, or showing, according to the analysis of Professor Yu. That in a way that sounds not very good, but it's the best of the ones you mentioned. Where does Chattanooga figure in Yu's analysis? Does he look at Chattanooga's EPB at all?
Yeah, he did look at Chattanooga's EPB analysis. He said it would be 412 years. Now, I talked to EPB. The people at EPB were gracious enough to answer my questions. The people at the other utilities were not. But the spokesman for EPB, John Pless, said that his analysis is completely false, and he uses adjectives like salacious and incorrect to describe the report. But I think what people need to know, for context, Chattanooga, as you know, took $111 million stimulus money to jumpstart this thing. The people at EPB have long said that it's not taxpayer money, but if it's coming from the federal government and the stimulus money, then yes, it is taxpayer money. But the EPB had this money, $111 million, to help jumpstart themselves, and the other utilities don't have this luxury. They're not getting any stimulus money or anything like that. They're generally doing this with their own money. So I wasn't able to examine the particulars of the finances with Chattanooga's EPB. It's like a he said, she said situation here. But I think for context, it is important to understand that Chattanooga was getting a whole lot of money that the other utilities are not, and they're in a bit of an advantageous position compared to some of the other public utilities.
Well, I think the problem of facing the board at EPB, Chris Butler of TennesseeWatchdog.org, is this: if you have a guarantee of free money, that prevents you, it saves you from having to make a real market analysis. If you think, wow, I can get $100 million to run my project, which seems right now to be the best option, the only real option, we're going to go for it. You lose the impetus, you lose the motivation to do a genuine analysis of the marketplace, which has many private factors, many technological factors. And here you're sort of making yourself short-sighted because you've got this pot of money that seems to be the solution to get what seems right now to be the best technology and the best system. So you're making yourself blind by taking that first free dollar that you say these other utilities didn't have the benefit of. And you mentioned Tullahoma having a 108, or no, Pulaski having a 108-year. Or wait, I'm getting the cities mixed up here.
Pulaski 500 years and Tullahoma 108.
Okay.
Yeah.
500 years for Pulaski to make a return. And that's from a law professor who has evidently some financial analysis gifts in his repertoire.
Yeah, and for further context, the study also said that a lot of people, a lot of public utilities, not just in Tennessee but nationwide, are patterning their municipal broadband projects after Chattanooga. Chattanooga seems to be the example by which everyone else operates. But again, Chattanooga got all this stimulus money, and these other public utilities did not. So just for context, that is really important, and that's something that public officials around the country need to understand and realize. But thus far, they don't.
Well, you mentioned Nashville, Chris Butler, in the context of the Airbnb fight. I know that the Beacon Center in 2015, I think late in the year, filed a lawsuit to block certain aspects of the Nashville city regulatory effort. Do you know anything about where that lawsuit stands now, and what's the conflict as far as you can see between the liberty of the marketplace, the sharing economy, and on one hand, and on the other hand, municipal governments such as Nashville or Chattanooga?
Well, I can't speak to the current status of that lawsuit, but I've done several stories about the Airbnb situation in Nashville. They're trying hard to regulate this. What's interesting, what's going on in Nashville, was two things. First of all, according to published reports, people are trying to make hotel reservations in Nashville, and then the hotels are canceling these reservations in favor of people who can pay more. But yet, hotels make the claim that they can furnish all the all the space that's available for people who want it. Secondly, what's going on here in Nashville is the city officials are giving all these tax incentives and taxpayer dollars to build these new hotels. I mean, up here in Nashville, if you look at the skyline, it looks dramatically different than it looked this time last year, because they're just building one hotel after another, and a lot of it is being done with taxpayer incentives and taxpayer dollars, and that's you've got crony capitalism going on there. And these are some pretty swank hotels. I've walked inside some of them. I mean, like 30, 40 floors, and it seems to me that these are not the mom and pop hotels that you might have had 40 or 50 years ago. These are the people who run these hotels have deep pockets, and I don't think for 1 minute that they're in any need of taxpayer assistance.
So is the effort to block or regulate the sharing economy through Airbnb, is that somehow privately or secretly funded by the hotel industry, Chris Butler?
Well, I tried to determine if there are any hotel interests who are lobbying or donating to any of the local officials here in Tennessee. I was unable to do so. So yeah, it's happening not just here in Nashville, but it's happening a little further south in Brentwood, which is right outside of Nashville. So it's in Nashville, it's in Chattanooga. I presume it's going on in Memphis and Knoxville as well. It's an issue all over the country.
This is David Tulis. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time here at Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7. We're brought to you by Clay Whitaker, probably the sharpest attorney in Chattanooga, Clay Whitaker, at the Jim McCoon Law Firm. Our argument is love your neighbor and buy local. And Chris Butler runs TennesseeWatchdog.org. Chris, how can my listener subscribe to you? What kind of output do you have as analyst of Chattanooga? Well, not Chattanooga, analyst of Tennessee government doings on your platform?
Well, the website is TennesseeWatchdog.org. We're on Facebook and Twitter. We generally cover waste, fraud, and abuse at the local, state, and federal levels throughout the entire state. And we've covered Chattanooga plenty of times with EPB and whatnot, and so that's that's what we do, and we've been very successful at it.
Well, listen, Chris Butler, thanks very much for joining us. I'll urge my listener to sign in, become a subscriber, and have everything that Chris produces in your inbox the moment he's done with it. Thanks again, Chris.
Right. Thank you so much.
This is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me a couple minutes of your time. The amazing London Tower fire prompts the question this morning as I watched the newscast and the terrifying videos of the flaming candle, not flaming just at the tip, but flaming all up and down its sides, where 600 people called a block of apartments in London, where 600 people resided, and many of them have perished in the flames. Why is that tower not collapsing? Why is that tower, which has a steel frame, not on the ground, as the World Trade Center was back in 2001? Remember, there was a very hot explosion as jet fuel exploded from the hits by two jets, and that's of course a flash of flame that lasts for less than a minute. And there were indeed fires on those very high perches at the Trade Center, and then suddenly the whole of each structure collapsed in a continuing roar of dust and microparticles. Things just pulverized as the buildings went down. Why, if there was just a little bit of fire there in those giant buildings that were designed to withstand jet impacts, did those buildings fall? And here we have a picture. It's called a tragedy on the news cycle today, of a building in London that will not come down, though the whole thing, it seems every floor is ablaze. Just a question again, because we question here the official narrative. Official narratives are largely false. They are largely marketing for the proletariat as the good people and their parties and their interests, their cartels, their operations, their deep state, if you will, operate in the background to bring about profit for the few at the expense of the common people, at the expense of law, at the expense of the rule of law. There's a very important story that's come out today. I haven't really mentioned. It's on several media platforms that I've got printed out here from WRCB TV. The NBC news version of the story, and the headline is "Rural and Small Town Jails Driving America's High Incarceration Rate." It's a study by the Vera Institute of Justice and the Safety and Justice Challenge, two organizations that are for jail reform. There's a quote in the story from Jacob Kang Brown, a researcher. He says, "The growth in rural jail incarceration has really flown under the radar. Many reforms to change mass incarceration are concentrated in urban areas. We tend to think that punishment and over-incarceration follows crime, and crime tends to be worse in urban areas. But rural areas have worse jail incarceration problem. And the problem is that jails in rural areas are stacked full with people from the prison industrial complex, people who are in private custody because they've been convicted. Pretrial incarceration rates jumped from 49 per 100,000 in 1970 to 265 per 100,000 in 2016. That's jail data from 1,900 rural counties. By comparison, the pretrial incarceration rate in urban counties, in city areas, rose from 101 per 100,000 to 200 per 100,000, and from 39 per 100,000 to 178 per 100,000 people in suburban localities. So the increase in incarceration rates in rural areas has skyrocketed compared to that in cities. And that's because these jails are for hire effectively, and people are incarcerated for months before they even see a judge. And it happens in these rural areas where there are not enough magistrates, and there's often a very careless use of the law. And we here at Nooga Radio, I'm David Tulis, your host here. I'm very concerned about the law. I think the law should be strictly followed. We are following several stories today, and one of them deals with the fright factor and the use by Chattanooga Police Department of unmarked cars stopping female drivers and male drivers, but stopping female drivers on the highway in cars that are unmarked, cars that do not have any external signia or equipment showing that they are in the public service. This is, I suggest, a violation of law. There's not explicit authority for that to happen. And I have an inquiry in with Wade Hinton of the city attorney's office demanding, not just that, I'm demanding on your account, demanding why this is being done and on what authority this is being done. I have the funny feeling that Phil Knopf is going to get back to me and saying, we don't give legal advice. Let's hope for the best. Let's hope that these two gentlemen, two lawyers, will have an answer for your inquiry. That's your inquiry, made by me, David Tulis, your representative and agent. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and